Hello, Rank Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the number one checkout on the planet. And the not so secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks.
Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Ranks FC podcast.
Hello, Rank Squad, and welcome to Ranks FC. It's your favourite transatlantic football podcast. My name's Jack Collins, and I'll be your host today, live from London. And joining me across the water, all the way from San Diego, is Mr. Dean Jones. How you doing, mate?
Hello, mate. Yeah, very good. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. I'm a bit sore from the gym, but apart from that, feeling good.
Yeah, the new gym life.
Well, it's
Gym Jack.
3 months of the wedding, isn't it? It's like, all right, you got to actually do something.
So cliche. Cliche.
I'm a walking cliche in many ways, mate. But there we are.
Are you planning to take your shirt off at the wedding? Is that in the plans?
It's not in the plans, but I wouldn't rule it out either. So I suppose it depends on how these next 3 months go, doesn't it? Like, let's see how we're going before we make any rash decisions about how things are gonna end up. But yeah, I thought it was for the best to actually start to get myself into a routine, but it is hard. I am sort of not enjoying myself hugely. I have to actually up the ante on this from, I wouldn't say a standing start, but we'll say a crawling start, shall we? So yeah, it's been a difficult couple of days, but alas, we're here. I'm good. I'm feeling healthy and happy and all of the above.
That's important, mate. Health is wealth. Come on.
Health is
Come
wealth.
on, Squad. Get fit. Go and join the beginners club with our mate Ben, the patron. Go and look him up.
There we go. There you go. Free plug for Ben there.
Free plug for Ben on the main pod. Yeah, true.
That's it. We're moving into the big leagues now. Look, we didn't 100% know what we were going to talk about today. Obviously, it's been an international break. I was thinking about maybe doing some early World Cup favourites, but it still feels a little bit far out to be really examining that at this point.
Very.
And then the news broke this morning, that it looks like Trent Alexander-Arnold's move to Real Madrid seems to be coming towards its conclusion, seems to be going through. That's the reports from across the world of football over the last sort of 24 hours or so. And listen, by the time this podcast comes out, by the time it's released, it might be official. I'd be surprised, but it might be official at that point. But I thought that rather than having this conversation about Trent and what he brings, we can obviously discuss that. It might be a launch pad into a little bit more of a chat around some of the other players whose contracts expire this summer, whether they might extend, whether they might go, where they might go. And so I pulled together a list of some of the biggest names who are out of contract this summer. Now, obviously, so much to talk about out of contracting has been the three Liverpool lads, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Virgil van Dijk, and Mo Salah. So we're going to start there. We're going to discuss these three in the context of the news about Trent. And then in part two, we're going to pick out 5 names that I'm intrigued by and that you might be able to help me out a little bit with in terms of potential destinations and also where or whether they might stay at their current clubs. And in part 3, I'm going to go a little bit rogue and just name a few of the other players who you might not know about who are out of contract and just examine whether there might be moves on the table for them as well. So a little bit transfery for our transfer guru today, but I thought it was a good time off the back of this and in the international break to maybe have a look at some of these names because stories are undoubtedly going to start to drop around these players over the next couple of months. So let's start with Trent, shall we? Let's start with this Real Madrid move. Now, for a while, it's felt like this has been in the offing. And whilst I think there was still some hope around Liverpool fans that he would stay at the club, that he would sign a new contract, most of the signs pointed to a potential exit. And now it does seem that seems to be edging closer to a conclusion.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. I mean, the agreement in theory has been in place for a while, to be honest with you. It's been a strange one to report on because there was and is a level of respect from the Real Madrid perspective. Now, you could laugh at that as a Liverpool fan. Like, yeah, of course there is. Like, they're snatching up one of our best players we've had in years. But they could have been more aggressive about this. They tried to sign him in January because they basically found out that he was up for it. Now, they touched base. It didn't go down very well. And after a brief flirt with the idea, they backed off again, knowing that Trent wanted to join them, knowing he wasn't going to renew his contract at Liverpool. So on the back of the January transfer window, Real Madrid had extreme confidence that they were going to get the deal done anyway, so they weren't going to push it. And we're now in a situation whereby there is an agreement on the player's contract. It'll be a 5-year contract for him to play at Real Madrid, but obviously there's the actual legal details to sort out on the actual confirmation of it. So I'd be surprised if this comes out soon. One of the reasons that I say there was respect is because there was a chance until recently that Liverpool and Real Madrid would meet each other in the Champions League this season. And there was no need for this to come out before that game might happen. And bear in mind too that ideally Real Madrid would like Trent Alexander-Arnold on board for the Club World Cup. I don't know yet if that will happen. I think it'll be difficult, but it's not impossible. And again, if they were going to be able to do that in any shape,
a fee would have to change hands.
It would have to be some sort of agreement, yeah, in that sense. So if that was to happen at that point, they needed Liverpool on side with everything. They couldn't rattle them, especially before they were due to play each other. Obviously, Liverpool going out the Champions League kind of changed the picture because it no longer mattered so much. And that's why details have now started to leak. Obviously, we're recording this on Tuesday. It was on Monday that I was starting to get some decent information from people at the Real Madrid end of things that they were getting fed stuff that this was going to happen and that it just needed to become more firm in the club to club situation of it. But they're very excited about this, and they made quite a big push for it. It really started October time. That's when the Spanish press started to be fed that Liverpool were in for a lot of trouble because Madrid were going for him. They decided that the opportunity was there and it had to be struck, and they kept working on it. By December, Marca were reporting that Trent wanted to be a Real Madrid player. Obviously, that led into a January transfer window, and that wasn't a popular source of information to Liverpool fans at that moment because they were, at that stage, pushing on a quadruple. But ultimately, that as that faded, so too did their chances and thoughts, really, of keeping Trent. I'll be honest with you, mate. I don't think it changes that much about Liverpool not having Trent. I've said it for a while. Out of the 3 contract rebels, they're not contract rebels because two of them want to stay. But out of the 3 contract situations, I've always felt Trent was the least important for Liverpool to get done. I think he is a great player. Like on the ball, he's got wonderful vision, wonderful technique, and I think he'll be a good signing for Real Madrid. But do I think Liverpool can live without him? I absolutely do. Do I think they can cope as well without the other 2, Van Dijk and Salah? I don't know. So if it ends here, then I think as a Liverpool fan, you're fine. But obviously this storyline now will feed into Van Dijk and Salah. And if those two end up leaving, you've got a big problem on your hands.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can understand the frustration from Liverpool fans, right? You've got a local lad who's come up through the academy, who's been there since the age of 6, walking away for free in a year where both Alphonso Davies and Joshua Kimmich were courted by Real Madrid with their contracts running out and both decided to stay.
Yeah,
right?
But he doesn't have to stay just because he's been there since he's 6 years old.
No, he doesn't. But to walk away on a free is obviously much more...
What's he supposed to do? If he signs a new contract, they're not going to sign him. That's the situation he's in. Like, how far do you have to take loyalty in football? Like, he has never spoken ill of Liverpool. He's seen through his contract that they gave him. He's not like lowered his performance levels. He's just got an offer that's come in from Real Madrid to go and play for them. And he said, well, yeah, I'll be interested in that. You're the best club in the world. My friend plays there too. He speaks of it well. And privately, he's just gone about it being like, yep, that all sounds good to me. Meantime, Liverpool haven't been able to win him over. I don't think this is this is a lot of kind of a divide. Some people think this is a lack of loyalty. Some people think it is complete loyalty. And I don't think it's a lack of loyalty to Liverpool. Like,
I don't think
signs a new contract.
For what it's worth, right? I'm not sitting here saying that. That's not what I'm getting at. But like, if I don't know, if Ryan Sessegnon had done this to Fulham, I know it's a different situation. I'd be fuming if he ran down his contract in order to get out. Like, there was.
But Trent hasn't done that. He was in the last year of his contract. Liverpool let him get into the last year of his contract.
Yeah, that is also true. And the club deserved
at the stage it got to.
Yeah,
at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of the season, this deal wasn't on. Like, Trent wasn't not signing a contract because he was going to join Real Madrid. That came up 2 months leading into the January transfer window when they realised that there hadn't been any breakthrough from Liverpool, so they tried their luck. That's Liverpool's fault. That's not Trent's fault.
Yeah, no, I can accept that. I can accept that as well. And that is one of those things we don't really talk about, right? It's not one of those things discussed. If Trent was offered a new contract last year and he turned it down, then maybe that's a different discussion, but that doesn't appear to be the case. No. So it leaves us with the other two. And as you say, I think it's going to be very interesting what Liverpool do now if and when Trent decides that he's going off to Real Madrid. How they replace him? Do they promote Conor Bradley and bring in a backup? Do they go and sign a Jeremy Frimpong, who Arne Slot has been very, very vocal in terms of his praise for down the years? Where do they go with this? What does it look like? It's going to be very, very interesting. But I think that's a discussion to have once things are done and once the transfer market sort of swings into gear. But I do think it's interesting in terms of where Van Dijk and Salah are at this point, because you made the assertion earlier that those two want to stay. Where are we with those chats? There's been a lot of talk about Van Dijk and PSG of late. It's kind of intriguing to see what happens now off the back of this.
Yeah, I think for both players, they've got numbers in mind in terms of the years of contract that they would want at this stage of their career, and also the financial gain that they would want in return for their services. I think part of the problem is that there aren't really many places in Europe that are going to match the wages that they're looking for anyway. So obviously, like for Salah, you've got the Saudi option, and like from a financial perspective, yeah, they'll cover that and more. So that's fine. For Van Dijk, I struggle to see it unless he goes to PSG. It's probably the only place he could get it, but I'm not even wholly convinced of that deal. So I'm struggling a little bit with it. I definitely think that there are figures within Liverpool right now, Michael Edwards and Richard Hughes they're the kind of public figures of Liverpool, and they're the guys that need to convince the ownership group to get these deals done. And they just don't seem to be budging on the length of contracts involved at these numbers because of the age of the players. And I think normally that would be fine. But given the circumstances of closing in on a Premier League title, given that Mo Salah's numbers this season are outrageous, given that Virgil van Dijk is such an unbelievable leader of that team, they're irreplaceable. Both those players are irreplaceable. Trent's not irreplaceable. Mate, the style of player, yeah, you're not going to find someone that's exactly like Trent, but you can deal without him. you can have Bradley and bring in someone else that can do a job for the team, right?
You can probably find someone to slot into the central midfield roles. I think actually it is maybe the point here. Maybe the midfield makeup looks different when Trent's not on the pitch, and that there's maybe more creativity at the base in terms of long range passing ability. But I do agree with you. I'm kind of on the same wavelength that if you're going to, Trent is the most unique of these three players, but that doesn't mean that his skill set is irreplaceable in the aggregate, to use a phrase that I quite enjoy.
Yeah. I don't know, like we'll see what happens with this, but are these other two necessarily more loyal than Trent just because no offer like that he's had has come along for them? Like, saw an argument the other day being made that Salah should be in an all-time Premier League team of the year ahead of Cristiano Ronaldo. And a lot of the argument was down to how consistent he's been over so many years, right? And that's fine. But during that period, like Cristiano Ronaldo had the temptation and the offer to go to Real Madrid. But Salah hasn't had that. So
that's to do with age as much as anything else.
Well, not really. Salah's been at Liverpool a long time. Like, he's been in the peak years of his career. Like, if he was... There was definitely opportunity, like if Real Madrid thought he was up to it, that they would have gone for him. And would Salah have gone? Or to Barcelona at some point? I would certainly argue he would have been tempted. Now, that offer hasn't come along for Mo Salah, which I do find interesting. This player that... It's very rare, really, that you get a player being this consistent in the Premier League over so long, and that they don't even come really close to joining either of the Spanish clubs. Like in this era,
if Barcelona's financial constraints have potentially fed into.
Yeah, I'm sure. Like obviously, we who knows? But I find that interesting. But I don't really know how we judge loyalty at this point when they haven't actually had offers to leave the club.
I don't think you need to judge loyalty. You know, it doesn't need to be played off against each other. I don't think we need to sit here and talk about whether one of these players is more loyal than the others. I think you're right. There's way too many different constraints that come into that in terms of external factors, right? But you know, that's not going to matter hugely to Liverpool fans at this point, I imagine. What's going to matter is getting these contracts on the tables and getting them signed.
Yeah, I mean, I assumed they would be done. And at the moment, I've got real reservations about both these deals being done. I still can't believe for the life of me that they'll let them go. But when I speak to people, they're like, FSG are not going to do these terms. They're not going to give a 2 or 3 year contract at this point on those numbers. Even though, Salah's not picking up injuries, he's in such good shape. He's in such good form. He should be capable of going into, on the numbers that he's producing, maybe Real Madrid or Barcelona should still be in for him. Who knows? But I just can't believe that we're even this close towards their contracts ending, and it's still a possibility that at least one of them goes. I'm trying to decide which one I think is more likely to go. And I think it's probably Salah, because I think that lure of Saudi Arabia is greater than some people realise. Not just, and because with Salah, it's not just for the financing of it and how rich he would become on top of how rich he already is, but, the cultural relevance of Salah as an Egyptian being in Saudi Arabia, that counts for a lot too, as they're trying to build
the Arab world, right? So there is an element there where if he went into there, he would immediately become the league's biggest star, and that is ahead of Cristiano Ronaldo. And I don't say that with any sort of disrespect towards Cristiano. I think it is just one of those where people would just gravitate towards him in terms of a cultural aspect of things. I think that's perfectly reasonable to suggest.
Yeah, so I think we're getting closer to a stage when Salah will be like, I'm going to have to go. And you can see his interviews, he's like, there's no offer, I'm leaving. He kind of says, I'm leaving. I'm in the final months of my career at Liverpool. He's speaking like that. Well, his agents are putting out messages like that on his behalf, I'd imagine. But who do you think is more important, mate? I mean, if you had to keep one of Salah or Van Dijk, who would you keep?
I think it's easier to replace a Van Dijk, not necessarily in terms of the quality that he brings, but in terms of, I think there are more out and out brilliant centre backs in the world than there are out and out brilliant right wingers who, have the goal output that Mohamed Salah has and has had this season. And whilst I think that Van Dijk's intangibles, the leadership, etc., is all incredibly important, and I think that, let's be very, very clear here, Liverpool should be keeping both. I do wonder if you kind of look at it and think, okay, could you bring in a centre-back of Van Dijk's quality for 60, 70 million pounds? Yeah, I think so. Who do you bring in to fill that gap if Mohamed Salah goes? How do you try to even go about replacing the output he's put in there? I don't know. Do you have to go back to Real Madrid and be like, how much do you want for Rodrigo?
Well, the alternate actually is you don't get a right winger that scores that many goals. So what you do is you sign a number 9. You sign a new centre forward and you get another right-sided player. That would be your way around replacing those goals. And obviously we're in a period of time when you see Man United and Chelsea and Arsenal all having to also look for a consistent, reliable centre forward. And all the names that get linked are obviously very similar: Gyökeres and Sesko and Osimhen and Ekitike, or whoever you want to throw into this conversation right now. Like there are, 6-7 forwards that are going to be coveted across this summer, and at least one of them should be able to go into Liverpool and score 20 goals or close to it next season if they build the system right around them.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to go and sign Alex Isak. If you lose Salah,
Sarah has left him out. Yeah.
I think that's the play you have to go and sign, because I think that there is a consistency amongst his ball striking, but also amongst his performances that would be the only way around this. But obviously also features off the other side at times. So,
well, are they going to spend 125 million pounds, Liverpool?
Well, when players are walking away for free?
Yeah.
Question mark.
Exactly. Like, what sense does that make? Like, you're refusing to give them these contracts. You're going to spend 125 million pounds on someone. It's like the other Jonathan Tah keeps getting linked as a free agent to Liverpool, right?
Just keep Van Dijk.
Just keep Van Dijk. You don't need to. Don't get someone else's free agent. Just sign your own free agent who's already here.
I'd be very surprised if Jonathan Tah doesn't end up at Bayern after the what happened last summer, at the very least. But
I think he might be going to Barcelona, to be honest, but we'll see. Yeah.
Interesting. There was such a tug of war for his services from Bayern's perspective last year. So, yeah, I mean, look, I think you're right. I think the obvious option is to just put both of them on contracts. My point about Salah for the whole time, I think Van Dijk is, you could just give a 3-year contract to and not worry that much about his age, really playing catch up with him at where he plays and the style of which he plays. But I would say this for Salah, that whilst you obviously can and reasonably have concerns that there might be drop off, Father Time remains, as we say, undefeated. And, it catches up with everyone eventually at different points, but it catches up with everyone eventually. The point I would make is that I think even if you sign Salah to a 2-year deal on big money, that offer from Saudi Arabia is almost certainly going to come in again next summer. I don't think it will go away. I don't think that interest will wane. I think there is still a get out if you need it, if he does drop off. Now, maybe it's not as much as it was last summer. I don't think it ever will be again. But I think that there would still be interest worth, following up. And that means that he remains a sellable asset. And at that point, there is also an element of, well, the finances make sense because you'd have to, as you say, go out and spend an extraordinary amount of money on someone to try and back that up or try and replace what Salah brings to the table. And if your only concern is that he might drop off with age, well, I think there's still a market. And if there's still a market, then you can definitely still move him on, even if you put him on a long-term contract.
Yeah, and look, just to kind of end this part of the show, like it's not just even about Trent, Van Dijk and Salah. What makes this situation even more important to get right is the fact that there could be 5 other players that leave this summer too, that they also have to, like, this is a summer of complete overhaul. And when you're getting a side that's becoming Premier League champions, it doesn't really happen that you have this huge overhaul in like a month after you've gone and lifted that title. But you're looking at a moment when you've got Konaté's future is in doubt. Luis Diaz's future is in doubt. Darwin Núñez's future is in doubt. Federico Chiesa probably isn't staying. Harvey Elliott might not be staying. Diogo Jota might not be staying. Andrew Robertson, they're looking to replace him with Milos Kerkez. Like, there are a lot of things here, as well as the goalkeeper situation. I'm going to assume now that Alisson probably stays for one more year. but obviously they've got Mamardashvili to come in if not. But Kelleher to go as well means that there's a decision to be made at goalkeeper. That's a lot of players. That's a lot of upheaval on top of the three that we're talking about.
Yep.
And so difficult to replace all of them. So I don't know how they go about nailing this, but I would suggest that losing these three players at the same time is an own goal.
Yes, I would agree. And I don't think that will happen for what it's worth. So we'll see how this one plays out. Right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to throw to a few more players out of contract this summer and see what Dean has to say about their situations and their possible future destinations. Don't go anywhere. Hello, Rag Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks. Welcome back to Ranks FC, where it's time for part 2 of this episode around free agents this summer and some potential moves that might be in the offing. Dean, I've got 5 names here for you that I want to discuss. And they're not in any particular order, so it's not particular ranking. But I wanted to start with Angel Gomes, who is obviously currently at Lille, has moved around since leaving Manchester United all those years ago, was at Boavista for a bit on loan, where I was lucky enough to see him in the flesh, and he was exceptional in quite a poor Boavista side, actually, and has really upped his ante since moving to Liga, has become one of the more coveted players in his position in the world, has got his first England caps as well at the same time, and now is out of contract this summer. Now, latest reports suggest that West Ham have already had an offer rebuffed by him, that he has no real interest in going to the London Stadium under Graham Potter, and that Tottenham remain top of the pile in terms of the interested parties. But I imagine this isn't going to be as straightforward as that for a player who has that quality and caliber and who is now a full England international.
Yeah, I mean, Fulham are actually in the mix here too, mate. They entered the conversation not too long ago.
Come join the Portuguese-speaking contingent, mate. You'll love it.
I'm not saying that that's likely, but they are a surprise name in the frame here at a time when he's not going to West Ham. I mean, whether he would join Fulham but not join West Ham remains to be seen. But I guess there's, Marco Silva effect and all the rest of it. And there's perhaps a more obvious spot for him to come into that Fulham team as they move forwards. But yeah, the main spot for him, the team that's been after him the longest, is Tottenham. They were even trying to strike a deal in January to just secure it. They would have paid a fee for him to just get it in the back. They didn't manage to do that, which surprises me a little bit. I was told at the time that Angel Gomes just wanted to kind of keep his options open, didn't feel the need to rush into that decision, but they've continued to talk about it, and certainly avenues are still open between Tottenham and Gomes to kind of go ahead and
he's from North London, isn't he? I'm pretty sure he's from North London. I think he's from Edmonton. So that would be at least a return to his roots in many ways, even if he spent a lot of his childhood, up north. Yeah,
I'm going to say, obviously, like the thing that people will attach him to in an English perspective is being from Manchester, being a Manchester United former youth player. And so that obviously has been mentioned as well, the fact that he could return to Man United. It's it's not probable that happens, but in a time when United don't have that much money to play with as they've reorganised their midfield, I don't think it's the worst idea in the world that they would be back in the mix for him. 24-year-old.
Bringing academy players back has always famously worked really well for Manchester United.
Yeah. We've got a 24-year-old here who's played for England at every level. He's now gone abroad to Lille. He's obviously played at Boa Vista as well, and he's broadened his horizons. He's learned a lot. And there's some real positives to take from a signing like this. But I'll be honest, I haven't had any firm information that Man United are close to getting that sort of deal done. And I do believe that Tottenham are the most likely club to get this done if he comes to England. Now, it's worth bearing in mind he does have offers outside of England too. I haven't been given any firm names on who they are, but I'm told he has very good profile clubs interested in him from Spain and Germany. So we have to take that into account too. Like, the Premier League is not the only destination for this player.
It wouldn't surprise me if he stayed away after all of this. And, having seen what other players, who grew up within English academy systems have gone on to achieve around Europe, I think that it wouldn't be the worst move in the world to actually stay well away from the Premier League and keep that flying, because, we've talked about this before with a variety of players, notably Jude Bellingham, but he's not the only one. And that idea that, sometimes actually just staying away, absence makes the heart grow fonder and all of that, that sometimes, especially if you are now in a system where managers are not going to overlook players for being abroad and plying their trade abroad, you actually often get a little bit more leeway and a little bit more scope to excite if you are playing away from the Premier League.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how would you describe him as a player at this stage of his career, mate? Because you've probably seen more of him than most people would have in the Premier League or whatever leagues they're watching right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's a really technically sound midfielder, right, who does keep the ball really well. He's able to penetrate in terms of his passing. He's a player that can carry the ball and he's good under pressure, very pressure resistant. He's quite small, quite diminutive, and can make things happen, but not shy in terms of physicality and getting involved. He's a little bit of the mold of someone like a João Neves, right? Like, he's not quite as good at him as him in terms of the way that he gets around and wins the ball back. But having a diminutive centre midfielder, and I think that actually this is a good point in terms of the Premier League, etc. Can you survive being 5'6" and quite slight in the middle of a Premier League midfield? In the same way that you look at a player, of his, who was shifted forward into that number 10 role throughout parts of his youth because he was quite slight, because he was quite small. But actually, I really enjoy him playing a little bit further back for Lille and being able to control the tempo of the game, having a player who's in there who's so technically sound and secure that they can move the ball around, recycle possession. Those elements of the game that you see kind of praised in a variety of leagues around the world that sometimes doesn't quite translate, right? You can be as technically secure as you want and technically brilliant as you want, but sometimes that does not translate to the Premier League. Now, that's not to say that it's better, worse, or indifferent to anything else. It's just a different style that sometimes comes into it. And we've seen this before where slightly more lightweight players coming into that and can't really do what they were doing elsewhere because there's such a physical battle in there. Now, that is a wild kind of blanket statement, and I appreciate that, but I do think it's worth bearing in mind that, when you are, especially if you're going into a club like Tottenham or Manchester United, for example, where the midfield battle, and there are plenty of teams out to get you as those two teams, right? For different reasons, but both of whom are struggling with it, and both of whose fans will get frustrated by the fact that at times they are being muscled out, physically outplayed in the middle of the park. Do you then want to plonk in a player here who is wonderful technically and can get about, but isn't quite, that person that's going to actually hold this whole thing up and be the physical player that you want in there to actually be your defensive midfielder? Now, he's not a DM. I wouldn't class him as a 6. I wouldn't kind of put him in that role, but I do think he operates best from a deeper lying role, as an 8 rather than a 10. And I think that when you put that into context, it is worth bearing in mind that the Premier League might not be the best destination for him. And even if it is, that actually going to certain clubs, do I think he fits Amorim's system? Not really. you want players in there who are going to be able to, especially if we're playing with the two in midfield, to be able to get about and destroy. And we've seen that from the players that he has utilised. Now, there are exceptions to that rule. Someone like Massa Morita at Sporting, who is a lovely and a very technically secure player as well, but just has a little bit more physicality than Angel Gomes. And I wonder if Spurs would potentially be the better fit of those two, but actually the correct move might be to go elsewhere.
Well, I can understand why he wouldn't commit to Tottenham, because he doesn't know the manager's going to be next season, does he? So that would make sense as to why he would be holding back on that. We'll see whether Ange Postecoglou survives this season, but there's every reason to believe he won't. And so for a player like him to commit himself to a club that can't give him a clear vision of what they're going to be playing like next season doesn't really make much sense when he doesn't have to rush into that decision. So I think he's better to put his foot on the ball right now and just wait.
Yeah, I mean, he's not going to be short of offers, right? Considering what he's achieved so far, what he's done within this Lille setup, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But I would imagine he is not going to be at Lille next season, would be the guess that I would make at this point. So we shall see how that one develops. I want to come back to the Premier League quickly. I will come back to Lille later on, where a big name is going to be thrown around. But I'm interested into what's going on with Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Now, more injuries this season, kept out of the team. And, Everton have kind of moved on without him. Beto really very much the man leading the line now for David Moyes, and he's come into a spell of form. And it's something we've just rarely seen from Dominic Calvert-Lewin over his time. There have been flashes of brilliance, but serious consistency over lengthy periods, it's just not something we've seen because of those injuries and because there have been periods where he has been bang out of form. But his contract expires this summer. And if he is on the market for free, someone is going to take a gamble on Dominic Calvert-Lewin because we know that there is talent there. But I'm just wary of who it is and what that might be, considering what we've seen from him from an injury perspective over the last few years.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to read because he's just not someone that you can rely on. I mean, he did get through a large spell at the start of this season without injuries, which was I was actually really pleased for the sake of him. He still didn't manage
really do any goals.
Didn't score any goals though. Like that was the thing. I was like, he's finally fit, and he's just not scoring goals. So I'm not sure what the temptation really would be to go and sign Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I've seen. I know that there was interest from Newcastle. I think they've probably moved beyond him. I think that Newcastle are at a stage now where they don't necessarily need to take a punt on Calvert-Lewin staying fit and being able to score goals. Feels too risky to me, even on a free. I think it'd be make most sense for him to stay, to be honest. But other links recently, like Man United, I'm sorry, but like that's a bad one. He's been linked with like Roma. I mean, the idea of him going abroad, I mean, personally, if he wasn't going to stay at Everton, I'd rather see him go abroad, I think, and try especially in Serie A. I think he'd have great joy in Serie A. And we've seen, the likes of Tammy Abraham go there and kind of reset and kind of rebuild themselves and come out of it with their reputation intact. And I think that Calvert-Lewin could probably learn from that. But it's a really tough call at the moment. Obviously, because of how ingrained he is with like Everton and the fact that they are moving stadiums right now, I think that there will be an emotive pull to keep him. But is it a good decision to keep Calvert-Lewin on an improved, bigger contract beyond this moment? I don't know if it is, mate. I don't know if it is.
I wouldn't take that gamble if I was Everton.
It's a strange one, isn't it? Because like he's been there so long now, and he was starting every game when he was fit.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily no longer the case, right?
Because they've changed manager, they've got a new system. Yeah, exactly.
And Beto's playing well. Like even in games where he's not scoring, we're seeing the player that they thought they'd signed all that time ago, right? Who's finally come into himself and flourish. This isn't to say that Dominic Calvert-Lewin is a bad footballer. He's not. But I just don't know if I would take a risk on a bigger contract, given that he has been so injury prone over the last couple of seasons. If I was Everton and I wanted to keep him, I would be putting him on lower wages and like a significant appearance bonus. I think that's the only way you could legitimately do this.
Yeah, and there's not many players that settle for that at this stage. And obviously, being a free agent,
Yeah, well, yeah. Why would he sign that? I get it.
yeah, why would he sign a worse deal than he's already on? But the fact is, he's just not the player that we thought he was going to become. We thought he was going to be a regular England international and somebody that was playing in a club that was competing for the Champions League again. And we haven't really seen Calvert-Lewin grow into that player. So it's a shame because I actually do really like Calvert-Lewin. I think at his best, he's a really, really strong number 9. But this is a big decision on whether to actually keep him. And I know that there's plenty of Everton fans that would rather see that money invested elsewhere.
Yeah, and I could completely go with them. Roma does sound fun. Go on over to Roma. Roma sounds good. We saw Tammy reignite himself at Roma.
I like it.
Maybe DCL could do something very, very similar. Okay, let's go Germany, shall we? Should we talk about Leroy Sane? Because in January, it felt like Leroy Sane was going to be exiting Bayern Munich one way or the other, whether that was an offer in January or it was going to be at the end of the season where he walked away. But feels like it's changed a little bit, this situation, Dean. And I wouldn't be surprised at all now that the first of these players that we're talking about, I wouldn't be at all surprised if he signs a new contract at Bayern.
Yeah, I mean, the club have expressed a desire to extend his contract, and they haven't really let too much leak around anything otherwise. So I can believe that they are looking to keep him. Bayern's sporting director indicated recently that they actively want to keep him. So there's a reason to believe that. But obviously, he's had this period of time to negotiate a pre-contract with foreign clubs. But here we are a couple of months into that window of being able to do that. And he hasn't done it. I think Sané would be pretty open-minded right now, but has to consider, is he going to end up at a better club, getting any more game time than he already is at Bayern Munich? Obviously, competition is tough at Bayern. But, if all goes well, they're going to win the league, probably win a domestic cup and compete in the latter stages.
They won't be winning any domestic cups, my friend. They're out.
Not this season, but in usually it's the way. So it's hard to go somewhere else and know that you're going to achieve those sorts of things. The Arsenal link has been most heavy in recent weeks. Obviously, Mikel Arteta worked with him at Manchester City. So the old reunion stories have been going around. Do I think Leroy Sané would be the answer to Arsenal's attacking problems on the flank? I don't really, if I'm honest. I don't think Sané is what they need. I
do.
I think his style of play is fine.
I think Leroy Sane would be a really, really good addition for Arsenal.
Personality-wise, do you think that? Or do you think it playing-wise?
I think both. I think that's the kind of player you want to come in there and be like, I've won things, let's go, let's move forward. And, you utilize him in a way where you're still allowing players like Gabriel Martinelli to flourish and work. But would it be an upgrade on Leandro Trossard? Yeah, for me it would. That would. And that's a step forward. It doesn't mean that Arsenal don't need to go and sign a number 9. They still need to do that. But I do think that bringing in a Leroy Sane would be a good thing for this Arsenal team.
Yeah, well, obviously, Martinelli or Trossard are likely to leave the club in the summer. There are briefings that they're open to selling one of those players. I'd be somewhat surprised if it was Martinelli, but I don't think it's implausible that he would go if they got a high enough offer. And I can kind of see why, because I don't think Martinelli's ever going to reach Saka levels. I think that's what you have to get to. If you look at what Liverpool have managed, they've obviously got Salah is their Saka, and he's just consistent and brilliant. And then on the other side, they've had to work on options of finding players that can kind of even compete in terms of output. And, Luis Diaz has done well in spells and stuff, and they've managed to kind of get around that with Diogo Jota when he's been in form. At Arsenal, they've had fits and spurts from Martinelli and Trossard, but I don't think with any confidence you would say that they're going to be the answer. And Trossard obviously isn't trusted as a regular starter in that Arsenal team. I don't really see anywhere else that Sane could end up. For example, I don't see him going to Liverpool as a Salah replacement. It's the kind of thing that has been mooted already. It's not terrible. It's not terrible. Like if they did lose Salah, but again, I'd be like, well, why not just keep Salah rather than go and sign Salah?
Never been completely convinced by Sane on the right. So, I think that would probably not be the move from a Liverpool perspective. But I do think it would be a smart move for Arsenal. But again, as I said at the top, I think the most likely thing that happens here is that Leroy Sane stays and extends his contract at Bayern Munich. But I thought it would be remiss not to talk about him. Two more to quickly get through. Let's go to Jonathan David, who is obviously the stablemate, clubmate of Angel Gomes at Lille, and whose future has been one of the most discussed things, I think, over the course of the last 6 months or so. He looks like he has done his bit for Lille. He has taken them as far as he can possibly take them. We saw him score what looks like his final goal in the Champions League for the club. And with number 9s, as we said, in demand this summer, there is going to be a major, major market for Jonathan David.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one because Premier League clubs have had the chance to sign him over the past 18 months and haven't gone for it. Part of that is because there have been scouts that, for example, West Ham could have signed Jonathan David last year easily, and they turned down the opportunity. They felt it wasn't a sure enough thing that he would score goals in the Premier League.
So they signed Nicholas Füllkrug instead.
They signed Nicholas Füllkrug, and now they've changed manager. Graham Potter's come in. They've sat down with him and had conversations about who would be the ideal striker for his team, and he told them Jonathan David.
Now, how the cookie crumbles, eh?
They're like, oh yeah, we have been in for him before. We'll see if we can talk to his agent.
We'll have a word.
Yeah. Funny enough, at this stage, Jonathan David not overly interested in joining West Ham. It's not really because of that. It's not really because it didn't happen previously. It's more because he could move somewhere better. He could move to a better club. This is a player that should be in the Champions League. It was a really interesting conversation that he had with Thierry Henry after playing at the weekend when he scored against USA. And Thierry Henry was very, very upfront about he was like talking to his face and said, I wasn't sure about you. It was when I was at Belgium and all the talk was around you and what you had the potential to be and what you might do. And I have to admit, I really wasn't sure whether you could do it. I wasn't sure whether you could reach those heights. I could sit here right now and say that you're legit. Like, he was like, you've done it. You've made it. And well done. And like, Jonathan David was like, thank you. Like, thank you. And I find this interesting because one of the clubs that has been in talks with David's representatives is Barcelona. So in January, on our Patreon, we did a lot of chat around transfers, obviously, and even on this feed we did it. And I said, like, there is a big club in for Jonathan David. I can't reveal it yet because I've been asked not to. As soon as I'm able to, I'll talk about it. And the club was Barcelona. And there are inroads that have been made there. Jonathan David would love to go and join Barcelona. That's what he would kind of hope for. He said in that same interview, he was very careful about what he said. He was like, yeah, he was like, at the moment, like I'm at Lille. We'll wait and see. But if I leave, then I'll push myself as far as I can. Now, pushing yourself as far as you can isn't going to West Ham. It's going to Barcelona. So that's how high he can set the bar here. Now, there are loads of other teams that are linked with him at the moment. Abroad, you've got Inter Milan and Juve that are kind of linked sporadically with him. I have to admit, I don't know how firm either of the interest levels are in those players. He's been linked with Man United. That's not going to happen. Chelsea, that's not going to happen. Aston Villa, a bit more reasonable to believe. Newcastle, a bit more reasonable to believe, but I'm told they're not actually pursuing it right now. Tottenham have had some interest too. So there's various things for him to look into. But
he's best mates with Angel Gomes, isn't he? Maybe they'll do a joint deal.
Well, obviously, Tottenham and West Ham both were after both players. Might well end up with neither. but is one of the more exciting players that's going to be making a transfer this summer. His goal record is outstanding. Like, consistently getting into double figures, consistently proving he can do it at any level. I'm very surprised that there were people within the game that were put off by the idea of him coming to the Premier League last year. Like, even at the time, I was like, I don't understand. Like,
I don't know what you're not seeing.
Yeah, like, I must be missing something because you know more about football. Like, you're a scout or you're like a recruitment expert. Like, you must be seeing something that I'm not in terms of something that isn't going to work.
It's weird because all-round number 9s have come into such fashion, right? People who can kind of do a bit of everything, who can get in behind, who can hold the ball up. What we saw from him in the Canada game against the US at the weekend, I thought was sensational in that he played as a number 10, dropped in deep, link play, and still ended up on the score sheet. It was really, really impressive. But he has got consistently better over the course of his career, and I can understand that, you know, maybe people thought there was purple patches going on or something like that. But realistically, when this kind of profile of forward is in such high demand, it stuns me that people are like, I'm not sure about him, considering what we'd seen in France.
They asked him about that as well, actually, because he did keep coming deep to get the ball in both games he played last week. And it wasn't really what he was supposed to be doing a lot of the time. He was like, the manager wants me to play further forward, but I just want touches on the ball. He's like, I need the ball. And I know that I do try and like follow my instructions and I try to press and everything, but like there are times in a game when I'm not in it and I want to be in it. There's interesting quotes from him from a while back. He did an interview and he was talking about Barcelona. They were the team that he grew up supporting. And he said that when you grow up supporting a team, it would be a dream to play for them. Obviously, at a time when you have to start looking beyond Lewandowski at some point.
Yeah, I mean, that feels like the perfect destination. I know that obviously we haven't gone, he should, you know, for a lot of these players, they should go there. But if Barcelona are interested, and they should be, then this feels like a really, really smart move. To go in there, 25 years old, be maybe the understudy for a year to Lewandowski before you take that shirt yourself. Like, everything seems set up perfectly for this succession period.
Yeah. And I hope that I'm doing a follow-up report on the one I did in February saying that this is going to happen, because I agree. Like, the way that Barca attack is shaping up with Lamina and Rafinha, and to now have Jonathan David going into the middle of that is a lot of fun. So, yeah.
If Jonathan David wasn't out of contract, clubs would be bidding like 50 million odd euros for him this summer.
It's too good a deal.
It's too good a deal to turn down. So I think you're probably right. I think he will move on. And I hope he does end up at Barcelona. I think that'd be a really, really nice fit. Right, last one, and a very quick. Roony Bardghji, who obviously is an incredibly talented young player at Copenhagen, who is one of the most highly rated talents in Europe, but who has not played a game this season because he suffered a very serious injury to his knee last May or so in one of the last games of the campaign. So we haven't seen at all what's happened this season. His rehabilitation appears to be going quite well, but it was always going to be long term. His contract actually ends in December, which is pretty weird, but it's just the way of how this works sometimes. But I'd be very surprised if there's not serious interest in him this summer. And also if Copenhagen weren't tempted to sell, given that they've just done a season pretty much without him, and that he could walk away for free in December.
Yeah, such a good player. You'd be able to get him for about £7 to £8 million in the summer by kind of getting in there early. And I think someone will do that. I'll be surprised if he did actually become a free agent at the end of the calendar year, as opposed to moving in this summer transfer window. Man City, Tottenham and Newcastle are the names that I'm given on him in terms of concrete levels of interest. Obviously, at the moment, they haven't really been able to be active on anything because he hasn't been playing. He's been injured for so long. But he is now on the comeback trail. He's working his way back. And so there will be, all three of those will be keeping close tabs on his situation, hoping to see exactly the same player that they were seeing before that injury.
Aston Villa, one that's been mentioned to me as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if they are in that.
It's a good fit, yeah, exactly. The sort of profile of the team that they're building. That's exactly what they'd be looking at, yeah.
Yeah, but one to watch this summer, Roony Bardghji. Very, very exciting young player, 18 years old, and one of Europe's top talents, available for a very, very low fee. So I'd imagine someone is going to be taking that gamble. Right, we're going to end at the second segment there. After the break, going to run through a couple more that have taken my eye on potential free agents that we don't really have any information on per se, but I just want to discuss very quickly. So don't go anywhere. Hello, Rank Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks.
Welcome back to Ranks FC. We got the transfer speculation guru, Jack Collins, to take us home.
Just a few names that I wanted to throw out there because I'm intrigued by some of these, and they're not necessarily names that, one, everyone will be intrigued by, two, but that people will realize are out of contract. The first one and the biggest name of this lot, I think, is probably Andre Frank Zambo-Anguissa, whose contract at Napoli runs out this summer. Now, Napoli have had a bit of an overhaul in terms of the amount of midfielders they've brought in under Antonio Conte, and Anguissa has not been as productive this season as he has in previous years, but still an absolutely masterful midfielder on his day. And I wonder where the interest will come on him, because someone who was so integral to Napoli's title wins, who finally, I think, gave the best version of himself at Napoli after things didn't always go perfectly to plan for him in the Premier League with Fulham. Seeing him kind of explode into life in Serie A was it was frustrating in some ways as a Fulham fan, but also quite joyful to see a player who so many had written off actually showcasing what he's capable of. So I think there's going to be loads of interest, but I would be absolutely stunned if he leaves Italy. I think that he has found a league and a place here where his talents are appreciated. And I think that there is going to be major interest from almost all of the big clubs in Italy if his contract is allowed to run out by Napoli. I imagine they will be desperate to keep hold of him, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Inter or Juve involved in this one in the summer, given his profile and given how good he is.
Yeah, I mean, I still can't believe that Fulham had this guy and just didn't actually see anything like the real version of him. Like, such a nightmare.
One night at the Den in the Championship where he was about to leave and he just ran the game. He was like, oh God, this is it.
I enjoyed that though. But yeah, he's obviously gone to Napoli and done bits, and it's a surprise really that he's got to this point where he's so open on his future. But surely no shortage of offers for a player of this type. He's so good. Yeah, I mean, I'd keep him if I was them, but we'll see where he ends up.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can never quite predict what Aurelio De Laurentiis is going to do. And Conte might look at it and say, look at the midfielders I've brought in, look at McTominay, look at Gilmour. We have a base from which we could build. I think it would be a mistake, but if he's depends on what the contract demands are, and you can have higher ones when you are a free agent. That could be an interesting one to keep an eye on in Italy. Here's one for you, a name from, to ages past, it feels like, but a little bit of a forgotten man. Sergio Reguilon, out of contract this summer at Tottenham. They will not be keeping him. Sergio Reguilon is 28 years old, Dean. Everything about Sergio Reguilon's career suggests that he's got to the end of it and people are like, oh, he's done now. But he's actually had to play a little bit more for Tottenham in the last few months with the injuries that they've had, and has given a relatively good account of himself. He was bought for a lot of money by Tottenham Hotspur. It was sort of 30-odd million pounds from, I think it was Real Madrid off the back of a loan at Sevilla. And he had a decent first couple of years, but he has bounced all over the place. He's been at Brentford, he's been at Manchester United, he's been at Atletico, none of which decided they were going to sign him permanently. I'm just kind of intrigued by this because a 28-year-old Sergio Reguilon is a really, really attractive option on the market, but no one seems to want to pick that up.
Yeah, exactly. You wonder what's really gone on there. He was never expected to play for Tottenham again. And obviously circumstances forced him back into that team. But yeah, there was a lot of surprise when he came on for his first game back. People like honestly didn't think this would happen again. Like he had been, when you talk about frozen out, he was about as frozen as you could be at one point. But he survived it, and his career's still intact, and he's still got a good few years left. So I don't know. Well, obviously, like the only thing I've really heard from this is that clubs that are interested in him are doing pretty deep checks on like what has actually gone on here. Like, what is there a personality fault? Was there just a clash of personalities within the clubs he's been at? Like, his form has been, obviously when he made that loan move last year, like he was expected to spark something. It didn't really, did it? Like it was fine, but it wasn't great. But yeah, for someone, this will be a great signing. I mean, I imagine he ends up back in Spain or something. I don't think it'll be within the Premier League. Yeah,
it stinks of Sevilla. Unless Brentford go back in on a free agent deal, that wouldn't surprise me either. But it stinks of Sevilla from where I'm standing. Here's one as well. Marco Verratti's contract is up in Qatar. He's at Al Arabi. He left, obviously, for big money from PSG a couple of years ago. And the reports on this that I've sort of did some digging this morning, because I looked at this list and I was like, ooh, that's interesting. And the reports are that he wants to return to Europe, that he's pleased with the money he's made in Qatar. And, at 32 years old, he still thinks he has something to offer to clubs in Europe. And whilst I cannot sit here and tell you that I have watched much of Marco Verratti at Al Arabi, I am intrigued by what happens next, because someone's going to take a gamble on Marco Verratti. He's not probably that beholden in terms of wages, because he's like, well, I've made my cash, I'm probably okay. And I wonder what this looks like. I think someone is going to go, yeah, you know what? There might still be a player in there. And it can obviously go one of two ways. We don't know what the drop-off has been. We don't know how much he's slowed down. But if you get a Marco Verratti who hasn't played all that much football over the last 2 years and is still at the peak of his powers in terms of being able to control a midfield, that's something that very, very much intrigues me. I wonder if this is the kind of move that a Serie A club go for at this point and go, let's just bring him back. And he might have one eye, let's be honest, on that World Cup 2026 squad, because there's no lack of depth for Italy in terms of midfielders, but Verratti is Verratti, and on his day was one of the best footballers I think I've ever seen in the flesh. So I'm kind of intrigued as to who makes a play for this, but I'm thinking Como.
Oh yeah. Oh, that'd be nice. That'd be really nice. I was thinking like Leeds should try and sign him. Leeds win promotion back to the Premier League, and you need someone that's got a bit of everything, and he's a free agent. Get him in, the fans will be like, whoa, we've got Verratti? Like, what? Because they're going to make a couple, Leeds are going to try and
make a splash.
Make a bit of a splash here, and obviously they're getting a bit of financing and stuff. So I'm not saying I've heard that they're going to sign Verratti. I absolutely haven't. But this is exactly the sort of thing I want them to make, one signing like this, as they're like, we are staying. And like Leeds, good profiler club for Verratti to go into if he fancies coming to England. If not, if he's like weighing up the two places that we're proposing, and you've got Lake Como or Yorkshire. Lake Como might win unless he just loves the Dales.
Yeah, I mean, Lake Como might win. Also, it might get him in front of Spalletti's eyeballs a little bit more than playing for Leeds. So who knows? But we shall see. We shall see. But I just thought it was one to maybe keep an eye on. I think someone will take a gamble on Marco Verratti this summer, and that could be fun. The last one is someone that I don't think you will have heard of. But Javi Puado is the Espanyol captain. Winger, front man, can sort of play across the front three. Quite small, very tricky, good scorer of goals. I really like him. And it looks like he is going to be a free agent at the end of the season as well. Espanyol's offers at the moment are being rejected, according to the Spanish media. And I think this is the reason I bring him up, is because I think he will end up in the Premier League. I think that at his age and with his goal scoring record, someone is going to go, yeah, that's a good profile of player to have in and around the squad. Now, he's the kind of player that I can imagine Spurs taking a look at. Javi Puado, he is a clever, intricate footballer who makes things happen off either wing, and also, someone who's versatile in terms of playing across the front three is always useful to have. But I just think that he's someone I've had an eye on in Spain for a little while. He's got a decent goal-scoring record. He helped the club get promoted, when they went back to the Segunda, and he's performed pretty much admirably, I think is the word I would use, in a relegation battle in La Liga. So he's just one that I would have an eye on, Javi Puado, a name that maybe isn't being thrown around very much right now and isn't a name that people will potentially know, but I imagine might be one of those stories that comes up in the summer and people are like, oh, that guy signed. We signed that guy. I think Javi Puado might be that guy. So I'd imagine there is going to be some serious interest in him because he's a very clever, very good, very versatile footballer.
I like it, mate. A proper Jack niche end to a transfer show. And one for me to dig into. That's a name that I haven't had on my radar at all, but I'm happy to look into it.
Yeah, well, I hope there's going to be updates. If that one comes off and Javi Puado signs the Premier League, I'm going to sit here with my crystal ball and tell you the lottery numbers next summer. But I think on that note, it's probably time for us to call it a day. So all that's left for me to do, say thank you very much to our transfer guru, Mr. Dean Jones.
Cheers, mate.
I've been Jack Collins. This has been Ranks FC. Thank you so much for listening as ever. No Champions League takeaway, obviously, this week, but Sam and Doogie will be back on Friday. They're going to be talking about Thiago Motta and Juventus and what happens next after his sacking. So make sure you're locked in for that one on Friday. But from us, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week, Rank Squad. Take it easy. Peace. Hello, Rank Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Allo or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks.